Hey, welcome to United Opposition with Scott and Marshall, or it's United Opposition with Marshall and Scott, whichever direction you look. It could be one or the other, but we're talking about immigration today. Here we go. Well, last week was April 1st, and we had a great discussion, Marshall. Talked about some crazy ideas that might be so bad they're good, right?
Yeah, I know. I think we could have solved a lot of problems if somebody had been listening to us up at the top.
I know. He's got to pass that on. Everybody share that one with you, with everybody you know. Talk about those bad ideas that are so bad they're good, and you never know. Sometimes it just takes a radical idea to just. Why not? Like to question the very basis. So a lot of our biggest, especially in the technology field, a lot of our biggest things that have come across because somebody said, "Well, why not? Why can't you?" Blah blah blah, whatever it is. Today, though, we are going to try to take on a little bit of a hot topic, a current topic and a hot topic going on right now with immigration. And I'm curious to see. Honestly, Marshall, where you and I are closest in agreement, and to see how close we are in being in agreement on this topic. I'm curious about that, but I'd like to start with this question because it's always good to define terms, and it's always good to see where common ground is, and if we're talking about the same thing. I would like to ask you this question, Marshall. I believe this question, my answer to this question would be yes. And I'm curious what your answer is. Does the United States as a nation have the right to qualify who comes in?
Yes.
Okay. So you and I are in agreement there. See, we're already starting off in agreement. This is great. What you expand a little bit on that as far as like, to what degree?
Well, while I advocate ultimately for a stateless, classless, moneyless, borderless society, which doesn't exist. I believe that's where we want to get to. That's not the world in which we live. And if nations have the right to self-determination. As a nation, we can choose how we want to live and the rules that we wish to live by. And as a nation, collectively, we have decided we're going to have borders. And at one time, we had wide open borders. We've decided not to keep wide open borders. We closed our borders to some degree. And now we control who comes in and who goes out. And since rights are a social construct, we have agreed that we as a nation have this social construct, this right to control our borders, which are also constructs. But that's where we're at. So that, is it my personal preference? Absolutely not. But this is the world in which we live. And okay.
You would agree that it's reasonable?
Yeah, I would argue that under the current in the status quo, sure, it's reasonable.
Okay. So then when does that come into effect? As far as like, I know that we had this discussion on Facebook that didn't in a Facebook topic typing back and forth a few weeks ago, didn't make it onto we haven't talked about it on the show yet, so we haven't discussed it here. But we had talked about the due process of processing someone who has entered our country illegally, and how do we set up due process to handle that? And one of the questions I asked was, if you're waiting in line, literally if you're at the border and you're at the passport, you're having to get, and that you don't have a passport, that you don't have any documentation or anything to get in the United States, and you get into the front of the line, and when they say next, you just sprint for the aisle and jump across and land on the American side. Can they just get you and say, no, go back in line, or you're in America, you are now entitled to all the protections of the United States?
Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure it doesn't quite work that way in real life, but when you do cross the border, yes, you're entitled to a certain minimum standard and level of.
You cannot just be put back.
Correct. We can't just take you and push you back across the border. No.
Interesting.
So that's right. You step foot on American soil. That's why, again, when we go overseas and we round up terrorists, there is a problem that is created when we bring them on board an American warship. Even though they're in chains and they're terrorists and they're prisoners, if they set one foot on an American warship, they are suddenly entitled to a suite of rights that they would not be entitled to if they had not set foot on that warship, because the warship is considered U.S. soil.
Oh, we just lost your mic. I'm barely hearing him. I think there's a connection issue on your side. I can hear you muffled.
You hear me?
Yeah, there you are. You were muffled for a second.
Okay. So the same thing applies to anybody who gets in. Does it sound like a game? Yeah, but that's how the law works. Are people doing this? No, I don't think they're doing this like en masse. People are not, sneaking up to the border, and when the immigration officer looks the other way, they jump over the border. And, I'm here, I got you.
That is effectively what is happening. They're just doing it where there are no immigration officers. They're just crossing the border.
Yeah. People are
it's happening.
Country illegally. I don't know about now. It's certainly slowed down substantially, but people do enter the country. People have always come into this country without permission, including probably many of our own ancestors, and so be it. What we do with those people, though, is what makes the difference. And because I believe in ethics, which is this idea that human beings are entitled to a certain minimum basic standard of care and rights and concern and dignity, I believe that they are entitled to this suite of rights that, they get when they enter the country. So that's it.
And I think this is probably the part where we might defer a little bit. I think there is a proper way to enter. I think there's a proper way, which I personally believe is too cumbersome as it is right now. I think the proper way to come into the United States is too cumbersome. I think it's so cumbersome that it encourages people to come in not the proper way. I think the proper way should be easier. I think it should be a very simple thing, criminal background check, and some very simple things of who are you, who's coming, what you're doing, what you're coming in, and let's make you a citizen. Like that, I believe the path to citizenship in the United States is too difficult. It should be easier, because I do believe this is the greatest country in the world, and I think if people want to come to this country and become part of our country and become part of the greatest country in the world, I think they should be able to. I think that is a privilege that they should be able to enjoy, and they come in the proper way. When that proper way is too cumbersome, I think it encourages people to come in an improper way. And I think that there should be laws to prevent people from coming in the non-proper way, because I do believe that the country has a right to vet who comes in, and has a right to background check and make sure that the people who are coming in are going to be people who are going to benefit society and not be a burden on society, and not be a criminal element or a burden in another way. But I think there should be, you come in the proper way. If you don't, I don't care if you make it into the United States. Oh, hey, you're here. You didn't come in the right way. We're just returning you where you came from. Your due process starts when you enter the right way. When you come to that door is when the due process starts. You cross over, you just get sent back. No, go back. Go to the line. That's all it is. Go to the line. I feel that is a reasonable reaction to people who are illegally bypassing the proper system. Just, we don't arrest you. We're not going to detain you here. We're not going to put you. We're just simply going, oh, you came across here. Nope. Sorry. Go back. Try again the proper way. That I feel that is part of due process, because you can't start due process until you come in the proper way.
Right. So that is effectively what we do. There are exceptions, of course, for asylum.
Yes.
Asylum seekers, people who are fleeing, humanitarian problems, criminal activity, whatever, political oppression, religious oppression, and so on. But that is effectively what we do, because the problem is this. Let's say you find a person in the middle of your town, not at the border, not at an immigration office, where the line is drawn on the floor and they put their foot across it or something. But in the middle of America, you find a person. How do you know that that person is here illegally without permission unless you engage in some sort of a checking activity? You have to check their documents, you have to check their citizenship, right? You have to. You can't just say, well, this person has a tattoo, or this person has brown skin, or this person doesn't speak English.
That's not what's happening. And I think that I think the way that it's done is the same reason, the same way that me as a U.S. citizen need to have certain identity to do certain things. That's the only way you do it. You don't round up people. You don't like, who does that look like? It's just simply when you go to get the DMV, when you're driving and you break a law and you're pulled over because you broke a law, you were pulled over because you were speeding or you ran a red light or whatever it is, you pulled over, I'm as a U.S. citizen, I'm required to produce my ID. And at that point, if they have no ID, that's when you start the process of, are you supposed to be here? Do you have identification? Let's find out who you are. Do you have a social security? You don't. Okay, well, here you go, deported.
Okay, so what you're talking about is due process, but it's not a police officer or a member of the executive branch that makes that determination. It's a member of the judicial branch who is trained with the help of advocates to speak and interpret and talk to this person and get to the bottom of it and then present evidence and then to a determination, and that's called due process.
Okay,
and that's happening. Is that the person is here illegally? Yes, they are deported.
Okay, you and I are in
fair. That's how it works.
Which is what has happened.
Okay,
which is what has happened. Even with this Abrejo Garcia, that's what happened. The guy from
so how did a person who is not El Salvadorian end up in an El Salvadorian prison? I mean, what's the story there then?
He is El Salvadorian. He immigrated illegally, was arrested at one point, went through the whole due process, and a judge through he had advocates, he had attorneys, and it was determined through due process that he was part of a gang, and he was determined to be deported. And at that point, the judge said, but not to here, because we do feel that there is some sort of potential threat to his life if you deport him to El Salvador. So they put the hold on it. So it was determined through due process that he should be deported, but then a stay was put on that because of potential danger. That stay in the paperwork didn't make it through all of the paperwork. So when they said who's been determined by due process to be deported, his name rightfully came up. But that secondary piece of paper, that secondary part that says, but not deported to El Salvador, didn't stay with it. But he was determined by due process and a judge and attorneys to be deported. Okay, that really happened. And everybody
didn't catch up to the rest of the paperwork.
Right. And
because we did a rush job with the deportation because we wanted to score a political basket, we sent a person whose life is now in jeopardy by your own admission there, who should not have been sent. We blew it.
Yes.
And now we can't fix it. There's nothing we can do. We can't
fix
it.
He was not rounded.
He was potentially sent the person back to their death. And you know, this is not the first time we've done this.
That's the argument you were making, and you were wrong. He was not rounded up because he was brown. He was not just picked out and said, oh, we're going to send you back because we think you're a gang member. He received due process, and due process determined he needed to be deported. Static in my ears. Okay, can you see? Yeah, we're getting static through your mic. That might be a bad connection on your mic. You're sending a bunch of static through there. Yeah. Sorry. We'll keep going. Keep trying a little bit if you can.
Let me try to.
There we go. There we go. Let's see how that goes. That seems to be working.
Right, So because he was deported and it was a rush job by the executive department, or the executive branch did a rush job,
Yeah.
the paperwork for whatever reason didn't get there, and there was no opportunity to say, wait a minute and stop. And again, this is not the first time in history that we've done
Right.
this to people that we don't like for whatever reason. I mean, during the Holocaust, we sent boatloads of Jewish people back to Germany when they were here legitimately seeking asylum, and they were put to death.
Which one is that? Is that Goldwyn's law, or is that rule number
Law.
Goldwyn's law, or rule?
Hitler comes up, whatever. But I'm, again, this is a historical fact. And again, Japanese internment and how we've treated the indigenous, the Native American people and so on. We get into this thing where we start to regard people as not us, and they're not entitled to the rights or the process or dignity or anything like that, and then we treat them as human rubbish. And that shouldn't be our approach. If we can't return people, if we can't repatriate people with dignity, then we should not be repatriating them. So I understand that we're going to want to deport people, but we need to deport them with dignity. And that means we don't film them in shackles and make videos of them in an El Salvadorian prison or
El Salvador did that. El Salvador did that.
We don't participate in that. Okay, American public
officials. The United States is responsible for how other countries treat their prisoners?
No, we had an American politician sit down and appear on camera. We don't do that kind of stuff. It's low class, it's a low blow, it's garbage, it's beneath us. And it isn't dignity. It's not dignified. This is not how we want to be as a nation. At least in my opinion, this is not the America.
Okay, I'm sorry. I want to go somewhere, but I don't know if I will. Where's your sense of dignity when we're talking about abortion? Anyway, it's hard to receive that from you. Honestly, it's hard to receive that from you talking about dignity when we stand on opposite sides of that. But sorry, the dignity.
I don't know how that. But
yeah,
the price of peace here has to do with this. But at the end of the day, right? We need to be.
You need another argument other than dignity. You need another argument.
Ethics, okay.
I mean, still the same, but okay.
Following the law. Okay. We have a law, right? That the judicial branch can place a stay on an executive order, and then the executive order shall not be carried out. Okay. You don't countermand a judge. You run it through the legal system. You appeal, and then the Supreme Court has the final word. And then
from immigration topic.
Huh?
I think we're getting a little off from the immigration topic. Now we're more talking about political judges and stuff like that. But I want to talk
again. You asked for a different argument, and I'm giving you multiple arguments in favor of due process. And this is the law. This is how things are supposed to work in our country.
The process is happening.
Okay, but it didn't happen. It didn't happen correctly.
It didn't happen. But are you saying?
The fast one?
Hold on. Are you saying that due process there's never mistakes in due process? That if there was a mistake, then it was not due process? If there was a mistake, are you saying that it did not go through due process if there was a mistake? That everything that has gone through due process has not had a mistake?
I'm not claiming that that due process is impeccable. I'm not making that argument at all. But when the executive action makes a step decision, and the process to catch up, this is a headset right now. We need situations. So,
hearing that online, or if it's just on us? Thank you.
We need to live up to the aspirations of our founders. greatest in the world, we need to act like it. And it doesn't mean that we score political baskets by
Mhm.
punching down. We don't need to do that. We can enforce the law without punching down.
Okay. Because I stand on the perspective of as a person who clearly am a descendant of immigrants. I know that at some point, I don't know the full complete story, but I know that at some point my great grandparents came to the United States. As I understand, my dad's parents were both born in the United States in 1919. Grew up. They're both the same age. In 1919, he was like the youngest of, like, he had 3 older sisters, and she was the middle of 16 kids of the Morales family that still is like half of Visalia is related to me. And but they came in at some point. I do not know if they came in legally or illegally. I don't even know if that was a thing in the turn of the 20th century when they would have come in somewhere between 1900 and 1919, the first 20 years. I'm not real sure where the border stood and what it was. And as I understand that my grandparents were born in the United States. My father was born in the United States, but both their families were from Mexico. So I know that I'm direct descendant of people who immigrated into the United States, which is why I am pro immigration, and not just on a personal level, but I understand the need and what makes this country great. Part of what makes America great is the fact that so many people want to be here and want to become part of this country. But I have ancestors who came from Mexico and wanted to be Americans, and they strove to be Americans, and they raised their kids as Americans. And then it just so happens that my dad married a white lady, and it just so happens that I happen to marry a white lady who is like Irish and Hungarian, and my dad married a French Canadian. So the kids in our family have gotten progressively less melanin in their skin, but it doesn't change the fact that us Garcias are from a family that immigrated to the United States to make their family to bring more to bring prosperity to their family by coming to this country. And I believe in that. And I believe that there is a way to do that, and people should be trying to do that. And that way should be easier. But I think we need to encourage people to do that way by not encouraging them to break the law, and that they need to come in the right way, come in the proper way, and that any other way should just be sent back. And it's very simple. Even like if somebody's in asylum, I understand you can't just tell them to wait in their own country. I know that's one of the policies that Trump wants to do. What is it called? Wait in the country, whatever the policy that you wait in your own country before you get asylum. And I get that, if you're fleeing the country, it's kind of hard to wait in that country. I just think it needs to be a very simple, okay, come in and you need to check in. As soon as you don't check in, the next time anything, it's possible you don't check in and you live the rest of your life in this country without ever breaking a law, without ever having to do anything that requires an ID, and you just never discovered. And okay, I get it. And you'll live here, and there's really no real way to process that. But as soon as you want a driver's license, as soon as you want to vote and you need to present your driver's license in order to vote, and as soon as you want to do anything that requires an ID, you're going to need to have that. And if you're illegally getting that, now you're committing forgery. Now you're not only breaking the law for crossing the border, now you're committing forgery and identity fraud. And you're potentially stealing someone else's identity by doing that. And you're breaking multiple laws to do that. It's very simple. Just come in the right way, get processed. If you don't come in the right way, I don't think we should be rounding up brown people like, let me look at that person. I don't think they belong in the United States. It's not that. It's just if you come into a point where any citizen has to bring their ID forward, and you're not able to do that, and you don't have the ID, that's when you're processed and deported. I don't think we should be looking at people, let's look at the people who are hanging out at Home Depot and, just randomly round them up and check for IDs. I'm absolutely against. That's not what should be happening. It needs to happen during the normal process of that any of us would go through. If we're pulled over, we need ID. If we're going to vote, if we're going to whatever that we would need, get a loan, whatever it is that we would need to, that anybody of us would be required to present an ID. That's when it should come up of, do you have an ID? And that's why I am really upset when states like California are willing to issue IDs to people who cannot be identified. Literally saying, we don't know, you don't have to produce any evidence of who you are. We're still going to give you an ID and let you drive here with an official ID, even though you cannot tell us who you are or where you're from. We're going to give you an ID to do that from now on. And I think that's absolutely crazy. Like, what other country can you go to France without any papers and get a French ID? Doesn't that sound ridiculous?
So here's the thing, right? I think we agree that there's a right way to do things and people should be doing things the right way. I think there's universal agreement that people who are here should not be breaking laws, regardless of how you came here, whether you came here illegally or legally or what. Follow the law, I think where there is some divergence.
What's that scene from Liar Liar? He held up another liquor store and he goes, "Stop breaking the law."
Okay.
Sorry.
So where we diverge is the level of due process. And I don't know if we disagree, but I think we broadly agree that there should be some kind of due process.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I don't know where we disagree. If due process is rules that you're here illegally or you've come here and you've broken the law, and under the law you're to be deported, you should be deported. That's how it works. I'm just saying, let's follow the law. But when we do it, when we carry out the sentence, if you will, we need to do it with a degree of dignity and ethics and empathy, not putting people in chains and filming them and making, videos or whatever to go viral on TikTok, just the same way, when we perform an execution, it's not done in public. It's done inside of a closed facility. And it is a relatively dignified proceeding, regardless of how you feel about it. It is not meant to be a public spectacle or a sensation. It is simply the execution of a sentence. And that's how we need to handle things. So,
well, hang on. If the judicial process needs to be public, why shouldn't the execution? If the due process should be public, why shouldn't and I don't mean execution as in killing, so why shouldn't the execution of the law be public as well?
Well, the law is carried out is the public aspect of it, but yeah, it's just
doesn't make it more transparent? Doesn't that make it better? Doesn't that show your country is carrying out the laws? Like, in those signs when you're going down the side of the road, your tax dollars at work. Isn't that a reasonable expectation to see it carried?
No, I think when you're dealing with human suffering and tragedy, and things like that, it's probably not the best to just be televising that. Sure, they're guilty or whatever, but again, it's just perp walking everybody and all of this stuff. It's just,
isn't that a deterrent?
No, it's absolutely not a deterrent. Just like the death penalty is not a deterrent. No, I just it's just not.
Well, isn't it reasonably punitive?
I'm sorry, what?
Isn't it reasonably punitive?
No, I think it's beneath us. It's just beneath us. It's just something that, come on, let's have a little more class. So, just like Peter in the comments over here, let's have a little more class, Peter.
Maybe I don't know. I don't know that I can give any level of class to people who brutally rape and murder people. I don't know that I can give them.
Right. Well, first of all, that's not all of these individuals.
Well, it's not. But I'm saying
it's a distinct minority of them. But even then, again, ethics still applies. So
yeah, but they're being. I don't see that as unreasonable.
Okay.
I don't see that as
that's where we're going to disagree, right?
I don't see that as reasonable, particularly with a lot of the crimes that, especially some of that are included in some of the gang members who were deported. I don't think seeing them being walked out in chains is that bad. Mm-hmm. I think it's deserved.
Yeah, I think we can do a little better, but that's
I don't
just me.
think-
That's where we disagree.
I don't think we have to.
Yeah, I know. Well, all right. That's where we disagree.
We mostly agree, which I was pleasantly, I don't want to say surprised, but I was hoping that you and I be on more agreement, and I am. I was just say pleasantly surprised that you do stand on the idea that there is a reasonable level of deportation that should happen through due process. That hey, there are people who don't belong in this country because they didn't go through it the right way. Due process them out, and then you got a chance to come back in. Just do it the right way, and please let's make it easier for people to get in. Let's make it easier for people to get in the right way. Again, I share this. I just close with this. I share this with a person that I worked with years ago, who was from Canada and was like 8 years and $10,000 into the process of becoming a U.S. citizen. I'm like, well, that's ridiculous. Like it should not take that much to become a citizen of the United States.
Yep.
So
I agree.
Well, this has been United Opposition with Marshall and Scott. We're here each Tuesday. Appreciate people on the comments. You had somebody give them a shout out in the comments there, Marshall. I think there's a comment on yours that you shared.
Oh no, Peter Gruber says Marshall is an idiot on the comments.
Well, I didn't see that, but apparently, thank you for. On that note, we will see you all next week. I didn't say it, but we'll see you all next week. God bless.
Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.